The 20th century, especially its second half, represents a period of epochal transformations, a crossroads of events that redefine society, the economy, and global politics. We are facing an era characterized by profound social upheavals capable of calling into question the very foundations of nations. These years have been marked by persistent economic uncertainty, which has undermined the certainties of the post war era and prompted new reflections on development models. All of this contributed to the birth of a new global order, an interconnected and complex system in which local dynamics intertwine with international ones. Our analysis begins with the revolutionary spirit of 1968, a symbolic year that sparked a series of irreversible changes. We will examine how these forces have shaped the world we live in today, providing essential insights into understanding the present. 1968 was not just a year, but a global wave of protests and movements that spanned continents, uniting generations in a common desire for change. The motivations were manifold, rooted in a profound desire for social justice and greater individual freedom. This impulse generated an unstoppable push to overhaul established structures. In the United States, the civil rights movement reached its peak, strenuously fighting against racial segregation and all forms of discrimination. Their struggles led to important legislative victories, establishing principles of equality that had previously been a mirage for millions. This success, in turn, inspired further struggles for rights. At the same time, new social movements emerged, broadening the scope of demands for change. Support for women's rights intensified, with demands for gender equality in every sphere of public and private life. Environmental protection became a priority, with the emergence of a previously unknown ecological awareness. Finally, advocacy for LGBTQ rights began to gain traction, challenging restrictive social and legal norms in the name of equality and respect for human dignity. These movements directly challenged traditional norms and entrenched power structures, calling for a more inclusive and just society. They demanded greater equality and recognition for long marginalized groups, who until then had been relegated to the margins of society. The climate was one of profound questioning and reform, where no institution or tradition was considered untouchable. Although not all demands were immediately met, 1968 and the years immediately following laid the foundation for significant advances in social rights. They contributed to a broader and deeper understanding of human dignity, recognizing it as a universal and inalienable principle. The optimism that had characterized the late 1960s, fueled by hopes for social change, was abruptly shattered with the arrival of the economic crisis of the 1970s. This decade marked a downturn after a period of sustained growth. The two oil shocks of 1973 and 1979 were the most emblematic events of this crisis, triggered by complex geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East. These events sent devastating shockwaves through the global economy, revealing its vulnerability and interdependence. The sudden and dramatic rise in oil prices triggered an unprecedented inflationary spiral, reducing purchasing power and destabilizing markets. At the same time, there was a worrying increase in unemployment, which hit millions of workers hard across the industrialized world. The combination of inflation and unemployment led to deep economic stagnation, a new and particularly insidious phenomenon. This period marked the end of the long and prosperous post World War II economic boom, which had ensured decades of growth and prosperity. The unfavorable economic situation gave rise to the term stagflation, a condition that openly challenged established economic models. Traditional economic theories, in fact, were ill equipped to explain the simultaneous presence of high inflation and stagnant production. This forced governments around the world to face complex and unprecedented challenges, seeking new strategies to overcome the crisis. The crisis of the 1970s dramatically highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy, showing how localized events could have global repercussions. It also demonstrated the vulnerability of industrialized nations to external shocks, particularly those related to energy resources. These events not only ended an era of growth, but forced a rethinking of the entire economic structure and dependence on raw materials, prompting new energy and diversification policies. The late 1980s stood out as a historic turning point, a period of rapid and unexpected change that would redefine the global political landscape. The collapse of the Soviet Union, a gradual but inexorable process, symbolized the end of an era. This epical event brought with it the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The demolition of the wall was not only a physical act, but became the most powerful symbol of the end of the Cold War and the ideological division of the world. That event marked the beginning of an era of unprecedented global interconnection, in which barriers seemed to fall one after another. The dismantling of the Iron Curtain facilitated the free flow of goods and services between East and West, creating new trade opportunities. It also allowed the free flow of capital, with investments crossing national borders at unprecedented rates. Even more significant was the free flow of information, thanks to the development of telecommunications and later the Internet, which accelerated the dissemination of ideas and knowledge. These factors helped accelerate the process of globalization, a phenomenon that had already begun to manifest itself but which now gained unstoppable momentum. We witnessed the rise of multinational corporations, companies that operated on a global scale and acquired ever increasing economic and political influence. The expansion of international trade became a hallmark of this new era with the creation of global supply chains and the reduction of tariffs. At the same time, there was a rapid spread of Western cultural influences, spilling over into every corner of the planet. Globalization brought with it numerous benefits, including new economic opportunities for many regions of the world, fostering innovation and growth. It also contributed to extraordinary technological advances, which improved the lives of millions of people and made the world smaller. However, this process also presented significant challenges and unresolved issues. There was an increase in economic inequality, with a growing gap between rich and poor, both within countries and between nations. Environmental concerns heightened as global industrialization and consumption put pressure on the planet's ecosystems. Finally, the issue of the erosion of national sovereignty arose, with economic and political decisions increasingly being taken on a supranational scale. The period from 1968 to the end of the 20th century proves in its entirety to be a profoundly transformative era, a crucible of forces that indelibly shaped contemporary life. The social reforms initiated since 1968, with their push for civil rights and equality, have redefined the collective consciousness. These struggles have laid the foundation for greater inclusivity and heightened sensitivity towards minorities and human rights. The economic crises of the 1970s, with their oil price shocks and stagflation, demonstrated the fragility of the capitalist system and the interdependence of global economies. These events forced a rethinking of development models pushing for innovation and energy diversification. They left a legacy of caution and an awareness of the volatility of global markets. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, symbolizing the end of an era of ideological divisions, paved the way for accelerated globalization. This phenomenon intensified the flow of goods, capital, and information, creating an increasingly interconnected but also more complex world. It generated new opportunities but also new challenges in terms of inequality and sustainability. Together, these key events laid the foundation for the globalized, interconnected, and in many ways complex world we live in today. Our world today grapples daily with the legacies of these pivotal moments, which continue to shape social, economic, and political dynamics. Understanding these transformations is essential for interpreting the challenges of the present and planning for the future.